The file that was never meant to be opened, it was officially described as a tragic accident. A fall from a building. A sudden, irreversible end to a promising life. But accidents do not leave behind two different scenes, 5 separate locations, missing medical records, and a piece of physical evidence that vanished from inside a man's body. Menglong was a public figure. A well-known actor with millions of followers, a carefully managed image, and a career that appeared stable from the outside. To the public, his death was processed quickly, explained simply, and closed without delay. Yet behind that explanation, an alternative timeline began to surface, one that raised a single unsettling question. If this was only an accident, why does every detail suggest preparation, control, and silence? In the days leading up to his death, reports indicate that Menglong had already been under pressure. According to accounts circulated online, he had been threatened and physically assaulted before the incident that would later be labeled his final fall. Around the same time, a cryptic prediction appeared on social media, warning that a male actor with a massive fan base and a leading role in a popular television series would soon face serious trouble. At the time, it was dismissed as rumor. In hindsight, it reads less like speculation and more like a signal. What followed was not a single moment, but a sequence. On the night of August 8th, Menglong was allegedly taken to a private villa where approximately 17 individuals were present. According to the claims surrounding this case, he was drugged, injected with unknown substances, and restrained. There are allegations that parts of what happened next were broadcast on the dark web. A video later circulated showing a stormy night, lightning illuminating a single yellow-lit window, and the silhouette of what appeared to be a human body suspended inside. Other shadows moved in and out of frame. Some viewers claimed they could hear sounds consistent with whipping. The following day, the violence did not stop. Instead, it escalated. By August 9th, the narrative shifts towards something far more specific. A small object, a portable storage device, a USB drive that, according to these allegations, contained evidence linked to money laundering and shell companies connected to powerful individuals. The claims suggest that Menglong either discovered this device or deliberately kept it as leverage. What is alleged next is critical. When pressured to surrender it, he did not comply. Instead, he swallowed it. From that point forward, his body itself became the evidence. That night, he was reportedly beaten, suspended upside down, and pushed to the edge of death. At some point, he was thrown from a height. Paparazzi would later capture the first images of his fall. He was still alive. That was only the beginning. Because the story of Menglong does not revolve around how he died. It revolves around what happened after he survived. And to understand that, we must reconstruct the final 72 hours, step by step. The first captivity. By the time August arrived, the situation surrounding Menglong was already unstable. According to multiple accounts that later surfaced online, the pressure did not begin on the night he was taken. It began earlier, quietly, and out of public view. There were reports suggesting that he had been threatened and physically confronted weeks before his death. The nature of those encounters remains unclear, but the timing is notable. Around the same period, a peculiar message circulated across social platforms, predicting that a male actor with tens of millions of followers and a leading role in a widely known television drama would soon face serious trouble. At the time, it was dismissed as coincidence. After his death, it became part of a larger pattern that many would revisit. On the night of August 8th, Menglong was allegedly brought to a private villa. The location was described as secluded, controlled, and inaccessible to the public. According to the narrative constructed from various claims, approximately 17 individuals were present. Their identities were never officially disclosed, but they were described not as random assailants, but as participants acting with coordination and purpose. What happened inside that villa has never been verified by any formal investigation. However, the allegations that followed paint a consistent picture. Menglong was reportedly drugged soon after arriving. Accounts describe him being injected with unknown substances, after which his ability to resist diminished rapidly. He was restrained and confined within the building. Some claims suggest that what followed was not only an act of violence, but a display. There were allegations that portions of the captivity were broadcast through encrypted channels on the dark web. These claims have never been independently confirmed, but they form a central pillar of the narrative promoted by those who believe his death was staged. One piece of material became especially significant: a short video that began circulating anonymously after his death. The footage was grainy and dark. It showed a stormy night, illuminated intermittently by flashes of lightning. In one frame, a single window stood out, glowing with a dull yellow light. Behind that window, a silhouette appeared. The shape resembled a human figure suspended in midair. Other shadows moved briefly across the room, entering and leaving the frame. Some viewers claimed they could hear faint sounds beneath the thunder. Others interpreted those sounds as screams or the crack of a whip. No official source authenticated the video. No authority confirmed its origin. Yet its imagery became deeply embedded in public discussion, not because of what it proved, but because of what it implied. By the following day, August 9th, the allegations suggest that the captivity continued without interruption. This is the point at which the narrative introduces an object that would later become central to the case: a USB drive. According to the claims, Menglong either discovered or intentionally retained a portable storage device containing sensitive material. The content of that device was described as evidence related to money laundering activities and shell companies, allegedly connected to individuals with significant power and resources. Whether this description is accurate remains unverified. What matters is how the narrative frames his response. The accounts suggest that Menglong understood the value of what he possessed. When pressured to surrender the device, he did not immediately comply. Instead, faced with escalating violence, he made a decision that would transform his own body into a hiding place. He swallowed the USB drive. From that moment on, the nature of the violence reportedly changed. The objective was no longer intimidation alone, but retrieval. Allegations describe him being suspended upside down, beaten repeatedly, and subjected to methods intended to force regurgitation. A separate audio clip later circulated in which voices could be heard shouting commands. Phrases such as "vomit it out" were interpreted by listeners as evidence of this attempt. Again, none of these recordings were authenticated. Yet when placed alongside later physical details, they became part of a narrative many found difficult to ignore. As night fell on August 9th, the violence reached a critical point. According to the timeline promoted by supporters of the cover-up theory, Menglong was pushed to the edge of death. At some point during the night, he was thrown from a height. This event would later be referred to as the first fall. Paparazzi photographs captured images of a man lying on the grass below a building. He was wearing a white shirt and blue trousers. His body appeared injured, but not lifeless. According to those who analyzed the images, he was still breathing. This detail is crucial. If the narrative is accurate, Menglong survived the first fall. That survival created a problem. Reports claim that the area where he landed was later disturbed. The grass beneath him was allegedly removed and replaced, an act interpreted by observers as an attempt to erase physical traces of the incident. Whether this action was deliberate or coincidental remains unproven. However, photographs of the altered ground circulated online, adding another layer to the growing list of unanswered questions. By the end of that night, Menglong was no longer at the villa. But he was not free. He was still alive, severely injured, and in the custody of those who, according to this narrative, could not afford for him to speak. And as dawn approached on August 10th, the focus shifted away from where he had been held and toward what would be done with him next. Because the first captivity had failed to accomplish its ultimate goal. The evidence had not been recovered, and the story was about to enter a far more controlled and calculated phase. The body as evidence. Dawn broke on August 10th, and against all expectations, Menglong was still alive. According to the reconstructed timeline, he was found lying on the grass below the building where the first fall had occurred. The images captured by paparazzi show a man severely injured, but not motionless. His clothing was clearly visible: a white shirt, blue trousers. There were no signs, at least in those early photographs, that life had already left his body. This moment, brief and undocumented by any official report, would later become one of the most critical fractures in the official narrative. Survival created urgency. Security footage from the area reportedly recorded Menglong being pulled back toward the building. The footage itself was never released in full, but references to it appeared repeatedly in online discussions. One specific audio fragment, allegedly linked to that footage, became particularly significant. In it, a voice could be heard saying words interpreted as, "Afraid he will run." To those who believed the alternative timeline, this phrase suggested that Menglong had attempted to escape on his own, despite his injuries. What followed, according to these accounts, was not medical care in the conventional sense. Throughout the daytime hours of August 10th, Menglong was allegedly subjected to repeated physical assaults. The objective, as framed by this narrative, was no longer punishment, but extraction. The USB drive that had been swallowed the night before had become the primary concern. His body was no longer treated as that of a human being, but as a container. Additional audio recordings circulated later, their sources unverified, their authenticity disputed. In these recordings, voices could be heard shouting commands. The phrases were brief, aggressive, and specific. Listeners interpreted them as demands for him to expel whatever he had concealed. Whether these recordings were genuine or manipulated remains unknown. Yet when combined with later medical indicators, they gained symbolic weight. Accounts describe extreme violence during this period. He was allegedly struck repeatedly, forced against windows, and restrained by multiple individuals at once. Some claims state that teeth were forcibly removed. Others describe him being slammed into glass panes until protective netting shattered. These descriptions align, in part, with later paparazzi photographs that showed damage to window structures near the scene of the first fall. At some point during this period, the effort to retrieve the USB shifted strategies. According to the narrative, Menglong was transported to a private medical facility. The location is described inconsistently in various accounts, sometimes referred to as a private hospital, other times associated with a luxury hotel complex. The Bulgari Hotel is frequently mentioned, particularly in connection with reports that glass surfaces in the area were cleaned shortly after. Photographs later emerged showing Menglong's body connected to medical equipment. Tubes were visible. A breathing apparatus appeared to be in use. These images suggested that he was alive during this stage, but in critical condition. Instead of clarifying the situation, however, the images were quickly followed by contradictory information released into public channels. False narratives began to circulate. Some claimed that the individual in the photographs was not Menglong at all, but another person entirely. Others focused on superficial physical differences, suggesting changes in skin tone or facial appearance as proof of misidentification. To observers, this sudden shift in discourse appeared designed to fragment attention and destabilize any coherent understanding of events. While public focus was diverted, the narrative asserts that a surgical procedure took place. According to these allegations, Menglong underwent abdominal surgery. The stated purpose was the retrieval of the USB drive he had swallowed. No official surgical records were ever released. No hospital confirmed the procedure. Yet later photographic details would fuel continued speculation. After the alleged surgery, the USB was no longer mentioned. What happened to it remains unknown. What is claimed next is that Menglong was moved again. This time, to a different building, identified by those tracking the timeline as Building 18. From there, he was reportedly taken to an apartment located on the third floor of a residence associated with an individual named Song Yiren. According to the narrative, this location was used not for medical care, but for preparation. Clothing was changed. Personal items were removed. The scene was reset. This phase is described not as chaos, but as planning. The individuals involved, according to the claims, were experienced in visual presentation. Some were alleged to have backgrounds in directing or screenwriting. This detail is emphasized repeatedly in online discussions, suggesting that the next event was constructed with deliberate attention to visual coherence. The first fall had not produced the desired outcome. It had left too many variables uncontrolled. A second fall, according to this narrative, would correct that. As night turned into early morning, Menglong's condition was reportedly deteriorating. The abdominal surgery, the injuries sustained during captivity, and the cumulative trauma had left his body weakened. Yet what mattered most, according to this reconstructed sequence, was not whether he could survive, but whether the final image could be shaped. By the time preparations were complete, the narrative suggests that Menglong had already been reduced to a prop in a carefully arranged scene. The stage was set. The clothing had been chosen. The location had been selected. And the final act was scheduled for the early hours of August 11th. The staged fall, shortly after the alleged abdominal surgery, Menglong was no longer treated as a patient. According to the reconstructed timeline, he was transferred once again. This time, the destination was Building 18, a residential complex that would later become central to the final chapter of the case. From there, he was reportedly moved to a third-floor apartment, linked to an individual named Song Yiren. The significance of this location does not lie in who lived there, but in what the space allowed those involved to do. This was not a place for recovery. It was a place for preparation. Accounts suggest that Menglong's remaining clothing was removed and replaced. The choice of garments was deliberate. Unlike the white shirt and blue trousers he wore during the first fall, the outfit selected for what would follow was different. A blue shirt and beige trousers. This distinction would later become critical when paparazzi images from different moments were compared side by side. The narrative emphasizes that this phase unfolded with an unusual level of control. There was no indication of panic or improvisation. On the contrary, everything described points toward planning. Observers who believe in the cover-up theory frequently highlight one particular claim, that several individuals involved in the process had professional experience in directing or screenwriting. Whether this is true remains unverified. Yet the claim persists because it supports a broader assertion that what followed was not accidental chaos, but a constructed scene. By the early hours of August 11th, Menglong's physical condition had reportedly deteriorated significantly. The cumulative impact of prolonged captivity, repeated assaults, a severe fall, and abdominal surgery had left his body fragile. There is no indication, within this narrative, that meaningful medical care was being provided at this stage. Instead, the focus appears to have shifted entirely toward controlling the final outcome. At approximately 5:15 in the morning, the second fall occurred. Unlike the first, this event was immediately framed as fatal. Paparazzi photographs taken shortly afterward show Menglong lying face down. His body position was markedly different from that seen after the earlier fall. His legs appeared twisted at unnatural angles. Observers pointed to signs they believed were consistent with post-mortem rigidity. His abdomen was partially exposed, and beneath the blue shirt, a white bandage was visible. To many, this detail suggested recent abdominal surgery, something entirely incompatible with the official explanation of a sudden accidental fall. Blood was visible near his head. Supporters of the alternative timeline noted that during the first fall, he had landed on his back. The presence of head injuries in the second set of images raised further questions about how and when those injuries were sustained. Some accounts claim that his face showed signs of blunt force trauma inflicted after death, allegedly intended to obscure recognizable features and complicate visual analysis. At this point, the narrative reaches its most controversial assertion. The second fall, according to this version of events, was staged. The location was selected. The clothing was chosen. The body was positioned. Every visible element aligned with a single objective: to produce an image that could be rapidly categorized as a fatal accident, requiring no further examination. The speed of what followed only intensified suspicion. Within a remarkably short period, plans for cremation were advanced. There was no prolonged public examination. No extended forensic review. Most significantly, the autopsy report that would normally accompany such a death was never made available. According to the claims surrounding this case, it was either lost or withheld. In the absence of that document, a critical source of verification disappeared. 5 locations are repeatedly identified as key scenes in this reconstructed timeline. First, the villa where initial captivity and torture allegedly occurred on August 8th and 9th. Second, the Sunshine Upper East complex, particularly the 6th floor, associated with continued confinement and the first fall on August 10th. Third, the private medical facility or hotel complex, linked to abdominal surgery and the removal of the USB drive. Fourth, Building 18 and the 3rd floor apartment connected to Song Yiren, where clothing was changed and the final scene prepared. Fifth, the 5th floor location, where the second fall occurred and the official narrative of death was established. When viewed individually, each location might appear unremarkable. When viewed together, they form a controlled sequence, one that moves steadily from captivity to erasure. The conclusion drawn by those who support this narrative is stark. Menglong endured days of intimidation, unlawful confinement, and extreme violence. He attempted to escape more than once. He resisted demands to surrender what he believed was critical evidence. In doing so, he prolonged his own suffering. According to this version of events, he chose to protect that evidence until it was forcibly taken from him, even at the cost of his life. Whether this interpretation reflects reality remains unproven. No court has examined these claims. No official investigation has addressed them in full. What remains is a void filled by unanswered questions, missing documents, and images that do not align neatly with a single, simple explanation. In the absence of transparency, speculation thrives. And within that speculation, Yu Menglong is no longer seen solely as a victim of misfortune, but as a man who, faced with overwhelming force, refused to relinquish what he believed could expose something far larger than himself. That belief, more than any physical evidence, is what has transformed his death from a closed case into an open wound. The file closed, the questions remain. Officially, the case of Yu Menglong ended with a single conclusion: an accidental fall, a tragic loss. No further action required. Yet when the available fragments are placed side by side, that conclusion does not settle the matter. It merely closes the file before its contents have been fully examined. The version presented to the public is simple and efficient. A man fell. He died. The circumstances were unfortunate but unremarkable. However, simplicity becomes a liability when it fails to account for contradictions. Two separate falls, multiple locations, injuries that appear inconsistent with a single event, medical intervention without transparent records, and most notably, the absence of a complete autopsy report. In any case involving sudden death under unusual conditions, such omissions are not minor details. They are foundational gaps. According to the alternative timeline examined in this narrative, Yu Menglong did not die in a single moment. He endured a sequence of events that unfolded over several days. He was allegedly threatened, confined, and subjected to escalating violence. He attempted to escape. He survived an initial fall. He was transported, treated, and then prepared for a second, fatal incident that would permanently silence him. Whether every element of this account is accurate cannot be determined without an independent and transparent investigation. What can be stated with certainty is that the questions raised by this timeline have never been addressed in a manner that satisfies basic standards of clarity. The most troubling aspect of this case is not any single allegation, but the pattern that emerges when they are considered together. The rapid cremation, the missing forensic documentation, the coordinated spread of contradictory information. Each action, taken alone, might be explained away. Taken together, they suggest a deliberate effort to reduce scrutiny rather than invite it. If Yu Menglong did possess material evidence related to financial crimes, as alleged, then his case extends far beyond the tragedy of one individual. It becomes a reflection of how power, when left unchecked, can reshape narratives, control outcomes, and erase inconvenient truths. Even if that evidence no longer exists, the implications of its alleged removal remain significant. The destruction of evidence does not eliminate responsibility. It merely delays accountability. In discussions surrounding this case, some have referred to Yu Menglong as a hero. That label is not a legal conclusion, nor is it a moral judgment imposed by this analysis. It is, instead, a reflection of how his actions are perceived by those who believe he chose resistance over compliance, even when the cost was unbearable. Whether that perception aligns with reality is a matter that only a full investigation could confirm. Justice does not require certainty from the public. It requires transparency from those in authority. When deaths are explained without evidence, when records disappear, and when questions are met with silence, trust erodes. And without trust, closure is impossible. The case of Yu Menglong may be officially closed, but it is not resolved. As long as key documents remain unavailable and critical discrepancies remain unexamined, the truth remains incomplete. In the world of true crime, that incompleteness is not an ending. It is a warning. Crimes may be buried. Evidence may be destroyed. But unanswered questions have a way of resurfacing. And until those questions are addressed openly, the file may be closed on paper, but it remains open in the conscience of those still searching for the truth.